been an interesting weekend. I was really thinking about Train on Friday, listening to his music, as I do every September 23rd. And then I woke up the next morning and Pharoah's gone. And I posted some of Pharoah's music, but I've been thinking a whole lot about Pharoah. Certainly, he's been part of my life. I didn't really know Pharoah. I was in his presence a couple of times. I'll talk about that in a second. When Pharoah arrived, he was a screamer. He was outrageous. I mean, people said to Coltrane, "Why did you hire Pharoah Sanders? He can't play." His experience was with Sun Ra, and so when I got to New York in '68. That's when I first really got into Train. Heard A Love Supreme, and I never looked back. I mean, the music just really affected me. Particularly around the time, Meditations, the '65 recording with Pharoah and Train and McCoy and Elvin and Jimmy Garrison. And I started to listen to Pharoah's music, and I actually heard him in person at the Vanguard with Lonnie Liston Smith on piano. Actually, the most notable thing for me that night was the English actor Trevor Howard was in the audience, who some of you may know from the film Mutiny on the Bounty, the remake with Marlon Brando. What's Trevor Howard doing listening to Pharoah Sanders? And then there was a John Coltrane memorial concert at Town Hall. Wow. Some concerts we remember our entire lives, and for me, that's one of them. The groups of Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner, Pharoah Sanders, Archie Shepp, and Alice Coltrane. That was, up to that point, probably the most intense music I'd ever seen in my life. The music was so intense, and the audience was so into it. After the concert, people just stood out in front of Town Hall in New York. They didn't move. They couldn't. An hour after the concert, and most of the audience was still outside Town Hall. It was a very memorable night. And that was during what I call Pharoah's first period. When he was on Impulse. He did a couple things for ESP, but mostly on Impulse during that period. The stuff with Train. But Pharoah was exploring the outside of jazz. Had his detractors, had the Train. He did one recording, though, on Impulse, Themby, that was a kind of a precursor to where he would go next. Because Pharoah had three very distinct periods in his life. Not many artists can change their music around. Pharoah certainly did. Like Miles and Train, like Picasso in his periods. But Themby introduced, it was when the electric piano first arrived, and they recorded out in a studio in LA, and there was an electric piano, and Lonnie Liston said to Pharoah, what is that? Why don't you try it? Lonnie Liston sat down, and he, on the spot, composed Astral Traveling. And not long after that, 5-10 years, Pharoah changed his playing, and he started his second great period where he played straight ahead. He played blues, he played bebop, he played beautiful ballads, and I think the spiritual part of his music was a lot more evident. He was always a spiritual man. It was during that time that I got to hang out in the kitchen of the Vanguard and spend a little bit of time with him. And after I was in there for a while, I talked to him a bit, and I said, Pharoah, I always wondered, what did John Coltrane and you talk about in the 60s when you played together? His answer, John and I never spoke about music. Wow. He said, John heard something in my music, he hired me, and that was it. Just like John Coltrane heard something in the music of Eric Dolphy and the playing of Eric Dolphy and hired him as well. And in the early 60s when Coltrane and Dolphy were playing together, Downbeat and other publications, anti-jazz. Wow, what could be further from the truth? And then Coltrane kept going. He didn't care. Kept changing his life, changing his music. He did a couple of, he did ballads and a recording with Duke Ellington and a recording with Johnny Hartman, which Bob Thiel, I guess, thought that would silence Coltrane's critics. Those are all great recordings. And then he hired Pharoah, and they just, from then till the end of Coltrane's life, sadly, in 1967, at the age of 40, he was exploring the outer reaches of the galaxy. But in the 70s and 80s, Pharoah changed and became like a straight-ahead musician. A lot of standards, jazz classics. That was the second great period. The third great period was, I would say, the past 10 years. I hate to use this word, but the first thing that comes to mind is New Age period. Recording with some younger musicians, different kinds of situations. Not really a lot of outward blowing, so to speak, but definitely kind of a spiritual vibe, because Pharoah Sanders was a very spiritual man, a very gentle soul. And I think Pharoah Sanders was not the kind of narcissistic, egomaniacal person who tried to like stress his importance and put himself in the limelight. He just played his music and worked on his horn. I know he practiced a lot. And as the years go on here, I think the importance of Pharoah Sanders in the history of jazz is going to grow. I think a lot of people were touched by him and his music, and will continue to be as the years go on here, if there is a future for mankind on planet Earth. I'm not certain about that. I would say 50-50 shot. Noam Chomsky, a man that I have tremendous respect for and have actually had a chance to interview, feels two things could wipe us out. One is nuclear war, which we're kind of on the edge of now. And of course the other is global warming, climate change. But it's people like John Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders who approach music a little bit differently. First of all, they want to change their own music and their lives in a positive way. They work on that consistently. And they have a spiritual outlook on this world. And I've met other musicians as well. I mean, Michael Brecker was that way. Always working on himself and his music, and had a real strong connection to people, the way he treated people. The people who matter are the creators who help people feel good, who make people get in touch with their spirituality, like Train and Pharoah Sanders. And if we can survive as a species, the music of John Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders is going to be part of our world, what people are going to be listening to 100, 200, maybe 500 years from now. And the history books are going to tell the stories of these other clowns. They don't matter. What jazz musicians do, I believe, is the highest expression of human potential. Extreme physical dexterity that is a unique combination of tremendous power and incredible delicacy. A ferocious intelligence that can be responsive in real time to the most sophisticated music humans have ever made. A beautiful soul that makes music something we all need and crave, and an interconnection between all those things and the universe that can produce a performance that is timeless and totally ephemeral. And those of us who listen to jazz and hear jazz live, this happens all the time. I'm sure this is no surprise to anyone who's watched my videos or seen my work. Jazz is about the hippest thing on this planet. And it will continue to be, because you can't kill a spirit, as Sonny Rollins said.